Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving straight into a fascinating and honestly highly charged legal defense document. Written by an author named Zufeng in June 2026, it's a direct, forceful protest against a sweeping series of arrests in China. We're going to go straight to the source material today to unpack the exact legal and philosophical arguments the defense is deploying on the ground.
Okay, let's kick things off with a staggering number: 80. Starting on July 2nd, 2025, over 80 individuals who are known as Lifechanyuan Celestials faced a massively coordinated series of cross-provincial arrests, interrogations, and detentions by authorities in Linzhou City. So we're not talking about an isolated incident here. This was a massive, highly organized sweep.
Now, you might be wondering, what on earth justifies a sweep of that sheer scale? Well, the core charge, which was detailed in the underlying prosecution notice for 14 defendants, was using superstition to undermine the implementation of the law. This single, rather broad phrase is the absolute pivot point for Zufeng's defense, and it's exactly what we'll be deconstructing today.
So let's break this down. Act I, the rule of law. Here we'll be analyzing the foundational legal arguments of the defense.
The defense's foundational argument hinges on the old Latin principle nullum crimen sine lege certa, which basically translates to no crime without law. Zufeng points out a critical flaw. Chinese law actually provides absolutely no clear legal definition of the word superstition. And the logic here is simple but incredibly powerful, right? If a law literally cannot define the exact behavior it's supposed to prohibit, how can it possibly be used to determine a crime? The author argues that this ambiguity completely strips the law of its legitimacy.
And the defense actually elevates this structural argument all the way up to a constitutional level. They argue that using this completely undefined concept of superstition effectively bypasses three major higher-ranking protections. We're talking Article 35, which covers freedom of speech, Article 36 for religious belief, and Article 37, ensuring personal freedom. According to Zufeng, when a lower-ranking law completely overrides constitutional guarantees like these, it just cannot survive a constitutional review.
Moving right along to Act 2, the application. Let's look at how the author claims the law is actually applied on the ground.
To do this, Zufeng immediately looks to the international stage. He points out that the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention has repeatedly ruled on this exact issue. They've determined that detentions under this specific article actually constitute arbitrary detention and straight up violate international standards protecting freedom of religion and expression. The defense is basically using this global consensus to attack the state's legal basis from the outside in.
Then, to highlight what he sees as selective enforcement, the author asks us a highly relatable, everyday question. Is tomb sweeping superstition? It's a brilliant rhetorical device. It really makes you pause and consider just how incredibly broad the word superstition could be applied if it's left without a strict, ironclad legal definition.
To really hammer this point home, the defense points to everyday cultural practices we see all the time. Think about burning paper offerings during the Qingming festival, worshiping and drawing lots in Buddhist temples, or chanting incantations in Taoist temples. Hundreds of millions of citizens engage in these activities daily, completely without consequence. The defense argues that leaving all these practices alone while specifically targeting the Lifechanyuan Celestials is ironclad evidence of a double standard, and in their view, political suppression.
Then there's the critical question of proportionality. 2.6. That represents the 2.5 years in prison handed down to an individual named Lifechanyuan Celestial. Other individuals received roughly 2 years and 8 months. Zufeng stops here to ask a really pointed question. What exactly justifies these heavy, multi-year sentences? Choosing a different lifestyle? Voluntarily contributing property to a community?
The author forcefully challenges these sentences by making a sweeping, definitive claim about the entire case. Quote, not a single specific victim, not a single specific unlawful act, and not a single specific harmful consequence. The defense is arguing here that throwing people in prison for nearly 3 years without a single tangible victim grossly violates the core legal principle of proportionality.
This brings us to Act 3, the philosophy. Here we delve into the danger of punishing thought and presuming guilt.
The defense alleges a full-blown presumption of guilt, claiming that the state basically worked backward from a predetermined conclusion to criminalize perfectly innocent behavior. Just look at how the labels are spun here. Normal social interaction suddenly becomes secret collusion. An open community is branded a hideout. Voluntary donations are reframed as collection of funds, and group study becomes superstitious activities. Shreffing argues this framing completely abandons the modern presumption of innocence.
And the defense takes this even further. They note that allegations like spreading apocalyptic theories or advocating sexual freedom relate entirely to ideas and beliefs, not concrete criminal acts. Shuifeng's stance is totally unwavering on this. Punishing thoughts equates to medieval religious inquisitions. It's a practice that in his view has absolutely no place in a 21st century society governed by the rule of law.
Which brings us to our final section, the conclusion, a global call to review.
The sheer volume of international bodies called upon in this document is honestly staggering. From the UN Human Rights Council to Amnesty International, the Red Cross, and human rights monitors worldwide, it really reflects the intense desperation of the author's plea. Shuifeng isn't just writing a defense. He is actively asking the global community to disseminate this document, calling on legal scholars everywhere to judge the validity of his legal arguments for themselves.
As we wrap up this explainer, we want to leave you to ponder this delicate boundary raised by the source material. Shuifeng writes, "A fundamental principle of modern rule of law is that thoughts do not constitute crimes." It's a striking quote. Regardless of the specific details of this case, it forces us to ask a universally relevant question. In any modern society, where exactly should we draw the line between regulating lawful behavior and policing human thought? Thank you for exploring this fascinating legal document with us today.